In the community center, Stephen Warren is making do.
I would like to go back to that building. I just moved into a unit on the first floor, and then this.
He and others staying at the shelter praise the work of the Red Cross and city workers and say they are being taken care of well. A resident who wouldn't go on camera says some landlords have answered the call and come forward to offer apartments. CBC is trying to confirm that with the city. But Dan Warren says the property manager sent a letter 2 months ago stating no one would be evicted during renovations if they paid their rent to an HST number, a note CBC News has seen. He believes the owners are holding to that.
We need our rent money to pay for other accommodations. I'm one of the fortunate ones because I called a friend of mine and he opened his door to me right away.
Meanwhile, the city is offering alternative arrangements to groups that normally use the community center.
Our gymnastics program continues to run, and it's being held in an area that's separate from where the folks are staying in the shelter. Our leaseholders are also still have access to their space and are using their spaces, but we have been relocating or canceling the rentals that are in the sports gym, which would include volleyball, basketball, floor hockey, and badminton.
Knights says those groups are being offered space at other community centers. If the times offered aren't suitable, then refunds or credits will be offered. A sign on the door at the Atkinson Center also lists several holiday closures. CBC is attempting to find out what plans the city is making for those days if the people are still living at the shelter. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
The Ford government's controversial housing legislation officially passed at Queen's Park today. The new law will mean sweeping changes to the housing industry in Ontario. The government says it'll lay the foundation to build 1.5 million homes in 10 years. But fierce opposition to the legislation expanded today. Chris Glover shows us the growing list of angry stakeholders who say they are not done fighting.
I declare the motion carried.
While the Ford government gave the Build More Homes Faster Act a standing ovation, loud hecklers were defiant inside the chamber. And protesters in front of PC MPP Mike Ford's office were incensed.
Oh, they did pass it. Oh, I didn't hear that yet. Oh, my God. No, that's horrible. Doesn't mean a damn thing to me. I will be protesting till this thing is rescinded.
This does not represent the end of a fight. This is only the beginning.
A coalition of climate networks, municipalities, and renters vowing to continue. While the Ford government argues the act will create affordable housing, there are no guarantees.
We feel that the government sent us like missiles with this law because it's attacking so many issues that we have been fighting for years.
The legislation waives billions of dollars in development charges used by municipalities to build things like roads and sewers. Toronto is set to lose $230 million a year.
Takes millions, tens of millions of dollars out of the pockets of cities that can't afford to be without that money and effectively leaves it in the pockets of developers. And this is just not anything that makes any sense.
We've got a big problem. It's a crisis, and we need all three levels of government doing their part.
Bill 23 is all about the Premier using the housing affordability crisis as cover to create an opportunity for a handful of land speculators to cash in.
The government is simultaneously proposing to develop thousands of acres of the protected Greenbelt. Investigations by the CBC and other media show some developers set to be allowed to build on those lands are PC party donors. The opposition is calling on the Auditor General to investigate.
I think where there's a whole lot of smoke, somebody better be looking for the fire.
We were open, transparent, and honest with Ontarians when we indicated that at the end of the day, there would be over 2,000 acres added to the Greenbelt.
We shouldn't be lied to, and we shouldn't be treated like idiots.
The former mayor of Ajax isn't buying the government's Greenbelt replacement plan. He's stunned Bill 23 also severely restricts the power of conservation authorities to review development plans. The fight against Bill 23 now shifts to December 3rd, when a day of action against it is planned. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
New figures released today in Ontario show food bank use in the province is at an all-time high. Feed Ontario says nearly 600,000 Ontarians accessed emergency food support last year. That's a 24% increase from the year before and a 64% increase over pre-pandemic levels. Here in Windsor, Essex, we know food bank use was up 16% this year compared to last. The report says rising food prices are a significant problem, but so too is the province's social safety net and the ongoing affordable housing crisis. In Windsor, for example, rent went up about 29% since 2018. That's among the highest spikes in the province. Local food banks are already having to turn people away at times as demand outpaces supply. And it is also time for CBC's Sounds of the Season campaign, a campaign to collect donations in support of the Windsor Essex Food Bank Association. We'd like you to join us as we come together for a month-long celebration of community and kindness and help support local food banks. And for more information on how to get involved, including how to donate, please visit cbc.ca/SOTS. The inquiry into the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act moves this week into its public policy phase. More than 50 policy officials are scheduled to appear offering their opinion on the Emergencies Act. The policy phase follows 6 weeks of public hearings that came to a close on Friday with testimony from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The price tag for the inquiry has not been finalized yet, but it is estimated at nearly $19 million. That's according to the Privy Council office. An inquiry is mandatory by law following any declaration of emergency under the Emergencies Act. The Commission's final report on the hearings is expected in February. An historic moment today for the Supreme Court of Canada as it welcomed its newest jurist. Michelle Obansawin is the first Indigenous justice to serve on the country's highest bench. Olivia Stefanovic has more on the milestone appointment.
Since its inception, Canada's highest court has made landmark decisions about Indigenous rights, but never with an Indigenous perspective. Now that's changing as Justice Michelle Obansawin takes her seat on the top bench. Introducing herself in her Algonquin language, Abenaki, before reflecting on breaking the glass ceiling.
I hope that my journey to this court will inspire young women to pursue their dreams. I am a big believer that if you have a goal, work hard, and never give up, you can make things happen and achieve those dreams.
A proud member of Odanak First Nation in Quebec, Obansawin is also a fluently bilingual Franco-Ontarian. She grew up on the outskirts of Sudbury, Ontario, where her dad worked for the mining giant formerly known as Inco.
I have always gone up and continued, at times with trepidation, but always moving forward.
Obansawin began her legal career with the RCMP and taught Indigenous law at the University of Ottawa after collecting a wealth of academic achievements.
Michelle, you must be running out of degrees to take on.
The Chief Justice calls her appointment an important step towards reconciliation.
I hope your story of persisting in the face of doubt will encourage students listening to today's ceremony to follow their dreams.
Before joining the Supreme Court, Obansawin was the first Indigenous judge named to the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in Ottawa.
I look forward to seeing the diverse perspectives you encapsulate as you enrich the decision-making process as you take on this role.
Known for her expertise in mental health, labor, and Indigenous law, Obansawin replaces retired Justice Michael Moldaver to play a key role in the top court's modernization. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
This just into our newsroom now. Windsor police have just posted on social media about a shooting on Hannah Street East near Marintet Avenue. They say a victim has been transported to hospital with apparent life-threatening injuries. Police say they believe it to be an isolated incident with no threat to public safety. In other news now, when an animal is found in distress or injured, many turn to an organization in Amherstburg. The Wings Animal Rehab Center has been taking care of creatures big and small from all across the region for decades now, and they never know what's going to walk, slither, or fly through the front door. Our video producer Mike Evans swung by, drawn in by a very vocal great horned owl.
Just a local passerby who found him out on a walk. He was down underneath a tree. No mom to be found. He got blown out from the storm the day before. And so when we got him, he was about the size of a grapefruit. Yep, we get to watch him grow up. And we teach him how to do what he has to do. So he's got to be able to hunt before we let him go. He's got to be able to fly, find his own food. So there's little steps he's got to do before he can go.
And how is it progressing? How is he progressing?
As you can tell right now, he's a little distressed. So it's actually doing quite well. We see the same number every year, usually a handful, so maybe 5. A couple of babies a year that get blown out, ones that get hit by cars, ones that are totally emaciated.
So this is something that you guys do every year. You find
every year.
People bring in owls like this one, and you raise them, and then you release them in the spring.
Yes, we do, exactly. So we've been around since 1991. I've been here for over 20 years. And every spring it's the same.
No.
I'm going to let him go. You should calm down. There we go.
Amazing work that they do over there. A live look outside. It was mainly cloudy today, 6 degrees, and it'll get back up to 10 degrees tomorrow with some strong winds expected later this week as well. Colette Kennedy will be here after the break with a closer look at your weather forecast. Stay with us. An update now on our lead story for you. Windsor City Council has approved what the city calls an historic investment in Windsor's transit system. In a 9-2 vote, Council approved $70 million in funding to go toward a plan to expand the city's current transit garage. That's instead of the alternative that had also been proposed for a new building. Bus shelters and bus stops will also be upgraded as part of this plan. The world's largest active volcano erupted overnight for the first time in nearly 40 years in Hawaii. Mauna Loa lit up the sky shortly before midnight last night local time, ending its longest recorded quiet period. It last erupted in 1984. Scientists say lava flows are contained and are not threatening any communities for now, though winds could carry trace amounts of volcanic gas and ash down the volcano. Mauna Loa rises more than 4,000 meters above the Pacific Ocean and is part of a chain of volcanoes that formed the islands of Hawaii. And now we bring in Colette Kennedy. What incredible visuals, just to see that is incredible.
Yeah, and I think NASA is doing a study to compare like the pollution from something like that with human pollution, so that'll be interesting to see.
That'll be very interesting to see, for sure.
How they match up. I have a feeling we're worse, but anyway, let's see on that. Let's also see what's going on with the temperatures. I'm showing you across the nation because I want to show you this cold air that is pooling again in the prairies. We've got several systems kind of coming in that'll be moving or merging and then moving towards us, and a lot of variability in our forecast. Temperature one day is going to be different from the next, and you're going to really have to pay attention to what the weather forecast is to make sure you've got the right gear and the right clothing on. Temperatures closer to seasonal, a little bit below, yes, over towards the Great Lakes. But the big picture, we've got a system that's here in the prairies, another one kind of brewing and pushing through the Pacific Northwest, but into the Rockies, and yet another which may be responsible for some very active weather in the southern U.S. And as some of this energy comes together, these lines showing you when they get really close together like this, they're connecting areas of equal barometric pressure, but when you see them really lined up tightly, we're talking about strong winds. So we've got an area of low pressure here, we've got the other two that I mentioned, and as some of that energy comes together and then comes towards us, yes, there will be some precipitation, but some of those strong winds will be coming our way as well. So this is a statement that's been issued from Environment Canada out ahead of this. It's for Wednesday, okay? It's not for not tonight, not for tomorrow, for Wednesday, with winds gusting 70 to 80 kilometers an hour, generally from the west to northwest. So tonight, it's actually a quieter night, not a lot going on. Most of the day tomorrow as well. Lucky if we get some sunny breaks. It's tomorrow late evening we'll start to see this coming in. Temperatures spike. Comes in as mostly rainfall, and then once it goes through, cold air drops down, and then the snow squalls will set up because, again, those very, very strong winds. So a lot will be going on, much of it through the overnight hours, though, Tuesday into Wednesday morning. For tonight, not anything too interesting with the temperatures 1 to -1, but tomorrow up to 11. Wednesday, we're talking still 9 degrees, and then that cold air shoots in, but then we level off towards the end of the week again. So
there you go.
There's the variability right there, folks.
Thanks for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
When we come back, anti-lockdown protests erupt across China. We'll tell you more after the break. Cities in Canada and other parts of the world are seeing rallies in solidarity with protests in China. It comes as public anger grows over the country's zero COVID policy. The weekend saw widespread demonstrations in Beijing and Shanghai. There have even been rare acts of defiance against the country's powerful government. Reporter Patrick Falk has more.
Well, protests there in Canada. We know there have been protests taking place in Australia and other parts of the world as well. But closer to home, here in Hong Kong, there was a vigil held this evening to commemorate the victims of that apartment fire in Xinjiang province, which is, of course, what triggered this wave of protests that has been taking place in different cities, in Wuhan and Chengdu and Shanghai and Beijing, among other places. We are hearing tonight, though, that in Beijing things are considerably more quiet. There is a much heavier security presence with people being stopped and having their IDs checked. We also know that in Shanghai, security has been stepped up as well, with barriers going up on Wulamuchu Road, which is where the main protest has been going on for the last 2 or 3 days. So we always had an expectation that authorities would act quickly to try and prevent this unrest from spreading further. It's hard to say where this movement goes from now, or whether or not authorities are going to do anything to address the grievances of the people, and in particular address their discontent over the zero COVID policy. State media has certainly been saying that China needs to stick to the zero COVID approach, which is perhaps an indication that the government is standing its ground on what's happening. But, you know, this has been a protest about much more than the COVID curbs themselves. It's also been a reason for people to latch on and express their grievances about many other things, including censorship. So we've been seeing people hold blank pieces of paper at these protests as a symbol of discontent over censorship. And so also a lot of people calling for the Communist Party to be removed and for President Xi Jinping to step down. So it has brought out a huge level of anger among the people in China over what's been happening there, particularly over the last 3 years, and people are absolutely fed up over zero COVID. Patrick Falk, CBC News, Hong Kong.
Before we go, 'tis the season for snowmen, reindeer, and glowing bedbugs. Biodiversity is the theme this season at France's National Museum of Natural History. They're using low-consumption LED bulbs to create giant replicas of tiny organisms. The idea is to highlight how essential they are to the world's ecosystem. That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/Windsor. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.